John Mateer in his first start, where last year, Erik, I saw him mostly as a running guy, and that's all he did is play a little bit. But he has a first start, and he really looked like he had great command of the offense.
Welcome to Pac-12 After Dark. My name is Erik Coleman, and I'm here with the legendary Coach Nick Aliotti. And we're going to talk about today, week one of the Pac-12. Oregon State played Idaho State today, but we're going to begin the show with Washington State as they start out the season against Portland State up in the Palouse. Great performance by Washington State. Jake Dickert, I thought his team was well equipped. They were ready to go. Coach, what were your first impressions of Washington State as they played Portland State?
Well, my very first impression is how well you did introducing the show and doing all that stuff, because there's no way I could have done that. So that's an A+. But initially, here's the things that I really liked, that really jumped out at me. And in the first game, there's always things you don't like. But what I really liked is I thought John Mateer in his first start, where last year, Erik, I saw him mostly as a running guy, and that's all he did is play a little bit. But he has a first start, and he really looked like he had great command of the offense. He threw the ball outstanding, particularly those intermediate passes. They were ropes. He had something on it. So my first impression was not knowing how John Mateer was going to handle the situation. I thought he was fabulous. That's where I'll start. I'll let you say a few and we'll come back.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I thought, the key to Washington State's game was getting off to a fast start. They obviously didn't. They went 3 and out the first drive and then let Portland State score in the second drive. But once all the nerves got settled, I thought John Mateer did a great job of running the offense. He delivered the ball in stride to his receivers and just really gave his playmakers an opportunity to, once they got the ball in their hands, they can make plays. And boy, did they make a lot of plays today. It got out of hand fairly quick. I believe after that first drive going 3 and out, the next 5 drives, they scored touchdowns. And I think the average drive was like 1:20. So they were scoring quick and they were scoring often.
Absolutely, Erik. And I tell you what, they were very efficient throwing the ball. Kyle Williams jumped out at me. I mean, he really had a special day, showed great speed on the one play. And then the young running back, Wayshawn Parker. I think I'm saying that right. Wayshawn Parker. Yep. I thought he was excellent in his first start as a freshman. Washington State ran the ball more than they usually run the ball, or at least in years past. Ben Arbuckle, I thought, had great command. I thought the play with the backup, the shoot versus quarters was fabulous. I used to always practice that play on defense when we were in quarters, because that middle backer probably has never seen that or even knows he has to run with that backup to shoot. So I thought there were some really good things offensively. And then conversely, on defense, it appears to me they're young. They seem young to me on defense. And the only, I think, negative, and I know a ton of guys played, would be the fact that you gave up 30 points. And I know if I'm Coach Dickert, and I'm sitting in that room giving up 30 to a Portland State, no disrespect to them, they'll be tougher opponents, is probably the most disappointing thing to him of the day. But they did get the W, and they looked very good.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I thought Coach Arbuckle did a great job of isolating the Portland State defenders. He created a lot of one-on-one situations. That cover 4, when they ran the running back up the chute, as soon as I saw it, I said they must have been in cover 4, because that's the play that New England used to run against us with the Jets. They used to clear everyone out and let Kevin Falk run one-on-one against the linebacker, whether he ran a vertical route or a corner route, and it always worked. So that's one of the weaknesses of cover 4. So I thought he did a great job of getting those guys the ball, getting them opportunities in space. I thought Kyle Williams did a great job of separating at the top of his routes. Chris Hudson, I thought Chris Hudson was another playmaker, made a lot of good plays, but just overall a great offensive performance by Washington State. And Coach, I agree with you on defense. that's not good enough. My biggest problem was that they allowed Portland State to run the ball down the middle of their defense. And as a defender, if you can't stop the run, then there's nothing you're going to stop. You have to be able to make a team play one-dimensional. And yes, Portland State last year, they averaged, I believe, 224 yards a game on the ground. So they're built to run the football. But you're a superior team. You want to make a difference this season, you've got to start with stopping the run. You can't let teams just run down the middle of your defense.
Well said, young Erik. I've never gone into a game as a defensive coordinator. I didn't care what you featured offensively. My mantra to the young men was, we must stop the run. Even if it's a 4 wide out thrown all over the field. You stop the run, you make them play left-handed, and then you know what you got to deal with. So, but it was interesting to me for a running back to get through that traffic in quarters and get down the field like the play that Arbuckle, designed. That takes a lot of time and it's hard to execute. So that was the most impressive play of the game. And then just Mateer and Kyle Williams and Wayshawn Parker, they all stood out to me. So it was a great day for Washington State. They're 1-0. And I always used to look at it this way. No matter what, getting that W is all that counts. And they got the W.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Coach, there was a point in the game where the defense really they did stop the run. They did a good job of making Portland State get one-dimensional, and that's when you saw that pass rush start getting to the quarterback. And once he started seeing ghosts, Sasha started seeing ghosts, he started throwing interceptions. He threw one, it got called back, and then he threw the interception in the end zone where Steve Hall returned it 100 yards, a record, a WSU record, 100-yard return for a touchdown. I thought that defensive line did a good job of creating that pressure and giving the secondary an opportunity. And I think they made up for some of the weaknesses in that secondary with the pass rush.
Yeah, Washington State did a lot of good things. They did a lot of good things and played. They emptied their bench. I mean, everybody got to play. It's a feel-good win. You win by 40. It's all good. And the beauty is a lot of guys played. The morale's going to be high at Washington State. Now they go into practice this week. They'll get better effort from their guys because guys that usually don't get to play got to play some. So the scout teams and all that's going to look good. And then the other thing is this. Game 2 now, much tougher opponent. You really improve, I think, the most from game 1 to game 2, in my opinion, as a coach. Your team takes their biggest leap game 2 most of the time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that matchup. It's going to be a much more physical opponent. Hopefully, Washington State can take that next step. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the Oregon State Idaho State battle down in Corvallis. So hang on with us. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Pac-12 After Dark. I'm Erik Coleman here with Coach Nick Aliotti. We're discussing the 2 Pac-12 matchups today. Washington State played Portland State and had a great victory up in the Palouse. Next, we will get into Oregon State as they battled the Idaho State Bengals. Coach Trent Bray, his first game as a head coach, came out victorious. Coach, what did you think about Oregon State's performance against Idaho State today?
Well, I'm going to start with this. This is an Oregon State that lost their head coach, lost maybe their best player in Damian Martinez, and a quarterback, and Childs. Don't want this to come across derogatory to you out there listening. Lost their league, so to speak, and had a new head coach. And I thought Trent Bray did an excellent job as a defensive coordinator. I knew he'd be a strict, good leader with trying to create a great culture. And he followed Jonathan Smith, who did a fabulous job at Oregon State. So I'm going to first off take my hat off, which I'm not wearing today, to Trent Bray in his first game and getting his first win as a college head coach. I'll start with that.
Yeah, that was a huge accomplishment. You step up, you have your first game as a head coach, and you come out victorious. That was amazing. There's a lot of distractions in the offseason for both teams, from the conference to transfers to all the other things that are going on. And it was great to see both teams come out and perform the way they did. And, for Trent Bray and the Oregon State Beavers, I was particularly impressed with how their offensive line took the fight to Idaho State. They were physical. It was one point in time where you were like, everyone in the stadium knows what Oregon State's about to hand this ball off. I think they ran 11 plays and they were all handoffs. They were all runs. Went down and scored. And that was kind of like that second half. They set the tone and said, you know what, we're going to run the ball. We're going to be intentional about it. And we're going to punch teams in the mouth. So, when you can clean up all the other stuff. But once you have a physical team who's willing to take the fight to that opposing team, I think you've got something. And, you didn't see much from the quarterback position from Oregon State, but you didn't need it. And, I think there's a lot that they can do, and they're going to be very successful in this league.
Just as we talked about stopping the run defensively, conversely, offensively, you need to run the ball. Mm-hmm. And Oregon State, which has done that very well in the past few years, they took off right where they left off. I thought that their mentality was, we're going to run the ball. We're going to run it downhill. We're going to win the game by running the ball. We're not going to make our quarterbacks be in third and long situations where they have to, do some things that, because they're new quarterbacks, that they're not used to. So, it seemed to me like it was a Trent Bray mentality. We're going to stop the run. We're going to run the ball. Oregon State was the more physical team. And let's face it, I'm always real, Erik. Oregon State should be the most physical team against Idaho State. But that's a good sign when they do what they did, because they got tougher opponents in the near future. So very good win for Oregon State. Great run defense, great run offense, and they got to grow in that passing attack, I think.
Yeah, and defensively, I think there's room for improvement as well. Idaho State came out firing on all cylinders, throwing the ball well. I believe Kobe Tracy, the first half, I think he was 7 for 8, threw a touchdown. And it seemed like, in my opinion, watching that game, it looked like Trent Bray was a little frustrated with his defense. So he said, you know what, I'm going to take it out of their hands and we're going to run the football. We're going to just wear these guys down. And I think the defense picked things up as the game went along, as they got confidence. But to start that game, it was the offense that really set the tone in the way they played. And 360 yards. 362 yards on the ground. You do that against anybody, you're going to be a very successful team. And I think that, you see the contrast in teams where Washington State, they beat you up through the air. And then you look at Oregon State and they beat you on the ground. It was pretty cool to see the contrast in offensive approaches. And, you can win both ways. So it was great to see. Overall, Jam Griffin. It was great to see Jam Griffin, a guy who was at Oregon State, left and went to Ole Miss. Didn't really have a lot of success there, transfers back to Oregon State and has an immediate impact. Also, Anthony Hankerson, the transfer from Colorado. These two guys are one heck of a 1-2 punch that Oregon State has, and they're going to cause a lot of trouble moving through the season.
Hankerson and Griffin were fabulous. That O-line was fabulous. Oregon State, the only negatives there, got to talk a little negative. The special teams miscue on the punt. That's something that shouldn't happen. Did first game. Griffin fumbled early in the game. If you're going to run the ball that much, got to hold on the ball. And then I thought that when you're watching on TV, sometimes you can't see it like you do with the cowboy in film. But the secondary play, I thought Idaho State had their way a lot of times throwing the ball, particularly in that short and intermediate routes. And there were also some plays that they missed getting behind the secondary. So the secondary, to me, I won't say they played bad because it was a first game and they only gave up 13 points. I'd say they just have to play better, more disciplined,
Yeah.
and tighter pass coverage.
Yeah, I agree with you, Coach. And especially looking at it from Trent Bray, he's the defensive coordinator. Once he took over as a defensive coordinator, he did wonders for the Beavers defense, and for him to watch guys lose a lot of those one-on-ones. Christian Fredrickson caught a bunch of one-on-one balls, and it was 50-50 balls, and Oregon State, it didn't seem like they ever won one of those 50-50 balls, and you expect those guys to make plays. And I give a lot of credit to Idaho State. They hung in there. They connected down the field, especially on the intermediate routes, and they stayed in the game as much as they could. You get beat up on the defensive line, and they run the ball down your throat. It's hard to weather that storm. But offensively, I thought they got into a groove at one point in the game, and something for Oregon State to go back to in the film room and make improvements and get better at. You always want to get better. You can, whether it's a win or a loss, how much you win by, there's always some teaching points, and there's a lot of teaching points after this ball game.
Yeah, and I have the utmost confidence in Trent Bray, and I'm sure, knowing him, you being a defensive guy, me being a defensive guy, he's going to look at that a lot more critically probably than the offense, even though he'll have a few things to say. So he will try to tighten up those things that he thinks he needs to tighten up. So I thought Oregon State played well. I really do. I thought, and I will talk earlier, I thought Washington State played well. I thought both of those teams got good, solid wins today. So my hat's off to them. Tougher opponents in the next week to come, but a great start for both of those teams.
Overall, it was a great week for the Pac-12. Washington State and Oregon State finished the week with victories. Next week, they have bigger, faster opponents. Washington State plays Texas Tech. Oregon State is playing San Diego State. Thank you all for tuning in with us on Pac-12 After Dark. I'm Erik Coleman for Nick Aliotti. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week.